Good morning, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the second day of the conference. Thank you for joining us today in track 3. Our theme is limited regulation and commercially driven, which is about how industry is approaching innovative commerce-driven initiatives in a landscape with limited regulation. My name is Andrea Zairi. I am the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Pixame, a SaaS company revolutionizing hiring. I'm chairing this track because I have been navigating this landscape for a number of years and believe that in order to not get wrapped up in the hype cycle, whether it's AI or streaming data, that we need to discuss the importance of these approaches to determine if they are the best manner to approach a scenario or use case. With that in mind, I would like to introduce the panel that I will also be moderating today, Moments That Matter Using Real-Time Intelligence to Personalize Every Customer Interaction. Joining me today is Vera Cvetkovic, the Head of Marketing, Operations, Data, and Analytics for Canada Post. And online you will find that we have Nidhi Sharmas, Senior Manager of Software Engineering at Cox Automotive. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to start by, Vera, would you mind introducing yourself? Because I feel like you would have a better introduction.
Sure. My name is Vera Cvetkovic, and I'm currently leading marketing, operations, data analytics at Canada Post. Canada Post is modernizing and digitally transforming, and data is a very important part of our business, and we're trying to innovate and use all the new technology while we're modernizing and digitally transforming. My background is technology. I'm an engineer. I started coding when I was 16, work mostly for the corporate high-tech organizations. I was a part of DoubleClick before Google acquisition, part of the Salesforce and Deloitte Digital.
Thank you so much. Nidhi, would you also mind introducing yourself, your name, your role, and a quick note on how real-time data and personalization show up in the work you do day to day?
Of course, nice sharing stage with Vera, and nice introduction there. I am Nidhi Sharma. I am Senior Manager of Software Engineering at Cox Automotive. And I've been I started my career as a developer. CRM Salesforce is my core competency. I've been on the developer, senior developer, manager, senior manager, literally hands-on keys with the development all the time. And real-time data and personalization have been the core of my work for years. I have spent a lot of time thinking about what it really takes to build the systems that responds to people in the moment, and system that feels fast, personal, and trustworthy.
That's amazing.
Nice to be part of the panel. Yep.
Thanks so much. Now with that, what I really want to do with this panel is I want us to get started with a little bit of an open round. So I'm going to ask a question to both of you to get us started. And I'm thinking, when you're designing a system, what considerations help you decide whether something actually needs to happen in real time? And the flip side of that, why shouldn't real-time streaming data be used for everything? What's the cost or trade-off that people tend to underestimate? Nidhi, I'm going to start with you, and then Vera, I'll move on.
Yeah, so to be honest, I'm going to start by saying that real-time is a tool, it's not a default. Right? I mean, the first question I usually think about or ask my product partners is, what is the action, or what is our business gonna do if the data is real? And if they are not able to answer that question, that nobody is gonna do anything within seconds, you do not need the real-time syncing of the data. Real-time does make sense if for example, customer is in the mid-session for comparing two products, right? And that moment is worth capturing. With the fraud detection, dynamic pricing, you are literally on the roadside and your car is broken, you're waiting for the assistance to come. Yes, real time does matter, right? It have to be as soon as possible. But on the other hand side, if you have built a beautiful streaming infrastructure, data is moving fast, everything is done so well, but the business is still making the decision on Monday morning, like 10 a.m., what is the point of making the data moving fast, right? So just because everything can move fast does not mean it needs to be fast, right? So in my personal opinion, or I'll say rule of thumb, before you build the real time, define the real time action. So whenever you're in the requirements of someone asking you to build the real time pipelines, my question will be, okay, if I do it, what will you do with that data within the seconds? And if I don't hear the right answer, I'll rather have the bargaining options like, okay, you know what? Let's talk about it. Vera, over to you. What do you think about that?
Thank you. Yeah, for us communicating with B2B or B2C, it's important to deliver our messages that they're timely, relevant, and personalized. But definition of what is timely, how to use that information, maybe our driver needs something that it's real time for the task that he needs to perform or she. But for certain activities, timely can be every day, every week, every month. So when we're designing our systems and thinking about the real-time data, is really what is a task, what is the use case we're trying to solve, what data points we have, how to stitch that data and how to activate in real time, near real time, because it's also coming to the performance. Sometimes business owners, they want pretty much to boil the ocean, but in reality, you need to think of like finding that balance of like having the right data at the right moment that can be really beneficial and used properly, but then thinking about like what can be supported and how to get the best to maximize the experience and to maximize the effect of that data using real time versus not real time.
No, definitely. And I find that in industry, we get very excited about these types of innovations and being able to do something like real-time data that sometimes we don't stop and have a discussion about privacy and data minimization. So I really want to dig into that with you, Vera. So for real-time pipelines that move fast and that create pressure around what data you're actually passing through, how do you ensure you stay within privacy guidelines from CPPA, CASL, sector-specific mandates, and only pass the fields that you genuinely need? And given that operational bias can lead users or upstream systems to send incorrect or excessive data in real time, how do you guard against that at the point of collection?
Yeah, it is really important, especially in the highly regulated industries like financial services, pharma, or public sector. There's extra layers of security and compliance that are applied. And when the systems are designed, there's those systems that they're like, when you're collecting the data, you need to follow the rules, whether it's a castle or some other rules. You need to properly store, and that's like your primary source of data that every other systems, whether it's a pricing or marketing or sales or services, that they always check and make sure that if it's a digital communication, if they unsubscribe, is it like absolutely unsub from everything? Is it like, do we have express consent? Do we have implied consent, for how long those implied consents are active? And making sure that that's real time, readily available and actionable, that we're not breaking any rules, and that we're compliance, because there's obviously audit and trails of like how the data is used and if the systems are compliant.
Do you find that these conversations are happening in the beginning of the discussion for real-time data, or do you find that it's in the middle, towards the end? And do you think really that the limited regulations are having an effect on how you navigate?
You really need to be proactive and think about those things in advance. but you also need to have a governance and checkpoints, how you're like frequently checking and what needs to be checked when, and if the rules are changing. Or financial services, they have like annual audits for different things that they need to be compliant. Different industries follow different rules, whether it's a pharma and dealing with the medical records, that's a different set of or subset of compliances and rules. For federal organizations, again, different set. But it's like being proactive in designing the systems, and then put the good governance, and making sure that you check frequently, and that quantifying and qualifying the risk, and making sure that the change management is in place when the change happen, how to address quickly, and how quickly, what is like your top priority, what is like is not that important, it can be addressed later.
So this is a conversation that people should be having if they want to build a sustainable solution with real time.
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. Now, off to Nidhi, I do kind of want to bounce a little bit off of that and talk about storage and data management. So now that we've talked a little bit about privacy, like once data has flowed through the real-time pipeline and a decision has been made, what leads you to decide how that data gets stored and managed afterward? How do you think about what's worth recording from the real-time trace versus what gets discarded? And where do you draw the line between real-time and warehouse data? Oh, did the audio?
I started talking and I muted myself. I didn't want it to cause the disruption. Yeah. So what I have learned in my experience is even if everything is flown into the system, you may not want to store everything forever, right? Because keeping everything is not a data strategy. It becomes a liability, right? You have to pay for the storage, and then the system performance degraded. Users are spending a lot of time just to fetch one record. So when it comes something for the real-time pipeline, I run through some filters like, what are we doing with that data? Is it driving any customer-facing decisions? Or will it make any future model smarter, right? We are in the AI world right now. We do need the historical data to train our AI models. If the data is needed for the training purposes, yes, we should save it, right? And who is using it, for how long, in what manner the data will be used, right? And if the answer to all these questions is no, then we have to have the purge policies. The retention policy needs to be going into the system, right? And that is where I feel like the most of the engineering teams admit, because not all the data age is the same way, right? So you may need to store a closed customer complaint for a year for the audit or dispute purposes, and after a year it should go away, right? It should be purged. Versus the transactional data might need to live in the system for a little longer, for 2 to 5 years, depending on how your industry or compliance rules are, which means we need to be thoughtful about the purge policies, right? And that's the real tension, where you cannot just purge everything on the same schedule. Like, every end of the month you go and delete everything. That's not going to be a one rule for everything. So some of the most valuable training signals, like the rare events, long-term patterns, edge cases, those needs to be used in our training models, right? So in that situation, I always ask, like, who is going to use and how wisely we're going to use, how wisely we are going to use that data within the system, and do you really need to store it in that core application, versus you may just want to store it locally, right? I mean, just take the backup, dump it in a local server, and use it whenever we need it. So it depends on, especially you don't want to pay for the storage for the cloud application like Salesforce CRM, right? So storage, we are paying for every storage there. So in that situation, any information that you are not using for more than 5 years, I'll rather export it and put it in the backup, and then when business need it, we'll just go from there.
And I really like the fact that you've addressed kind of the elephant in the room, where I guess what everyone's talking about, artificial intelligence. I think that we really need to bring that into this conversation, because some people do believe that there is a risk associated with applying agentic AI or AI into a real streaming workflow. So I want to open it up to both of you. What do you think are the risks associated with maybe implementing agentic AI with like real-time streaming data? Vera, would you like to go first?
Sure. The risk is real, but we shouldn't be afraid of take some calculated risk. What are the business drivers and what we're trying to accomplish when we're talking about the AI risk and governance. Sometimes we want those machines to speed up the process if we're searching for the lead generation or some stuff. Sometimes we want to slow the process. So, the human element of like designing with the AI, designing those agents, it's critical, and that's non-negotiable. Like those agentic models and AI will not replace the humans. It's going to help us design and accelerate in like how quickly we can get to the certain point, and make sure that we put all the guardrails, quantify and qualify risk, what we can accept, what is acceptable for the business, and what is not acceptable, how to mitigate that risk, and what is the calculated risk to run business smoothly with all the help we can get from AI, but keeping in mind that, how the change management will cover the risks that is, and needs to constantly check. Something that it's like in the beginning, the risk and you're following could change, because as the business is evolving and the technology is evolving, you need to have that mechanism, how frequently you're checking your identified risk and how you're addressing that accordingly.
Nidhi, do you have any points to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to agree what Vera is saying. Like, risk is real, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try, right? The human in the loop is the infrastructure, right? You have to have the governance team sitting on the right place, but at the same time, elevating your customer care representative experience. Also, you do not want to now, I mean, we are in the AI transformational world right now. Every industry wants to use the AI capabilities, because it's going to be making your reps more efficient, especially on those daily routine jobs. But that doesn't mean that you can completely take them out. Human in the loop is going to be always the thing, and that's how we can be successful. It's not a kind of no replacement, it's more like successful together model that we should be looking towards. Again, the compliance needs to be checked, governance team needs to be there, the constitution needs to be written, and we have to make sure we are doing the right thing versus we are getting scared of the AI.
No, definitely. And I think that we can stay on this track, because I noticed that most of the audience kind of perked up as soon as we brought AI into the conversation. So on the AI side specifically, model inference adds latency on top of data movement. So how do you manage that latency budget so personalization still feels instant to the customer? And Nidhi, I'm going to start with you and then move back to Vera.
Okay, can you repeat the question? Sorry, I was
a little
distracted.
Yeah, no problem at all. So when we're talking about AI, model inference adds latency on top of data movement. So how do you manage that latency so that personalization for real-time data still feels instant to the customer?
Yeah, so that is something, we have to make sure when we are experimenting with the AI models, we are doing more like a pilot releases versus kind of, trying to be perfect at the beginning of the launch, right? So take a pilot user, maybe just one dealer or one customer only at a time, right? You build your agent because you can't be perfect in this. There's no any history of implementing AI. So taking little steps, smaller steps will be is what how we are achieving or approaching the AI, and training our models on top of our mistakes. Like, when you have launched the first version, you have to train with the additional data, having more like the feedback loop going in, right? And then launching it for the further customers there.
How about you, Vera? How do you guys approach the latency issue?
We're in the early stages of piloting some of the models for addressing that type of challenges, but it also depends on the systems where we're applying the AI. At any given point, we have like a 30 to 40 different projects and initiatives with the AI, whether it's like a productivity, whether it's like a tools embedded in our systems, and whether it's like some big projects like optimizing the fleet, and using the AI for optimization. In the cases where the near real-time, data is required, there's always challenge. And, we always say, what is the real time? How many milliseconds or seconds you need, or it's a near real time. So it's by defining, what is the definition of success and what is the definition of the real time, and then taking into multiple iterations while you're getting to the point that it's good for business, but it's also supported by technology.
Do you find that it's easier to test out AI pilots and move forward with innovation considering Canada's limited regulations for essentially AI in of itself?
I am not sure.
You're not sure? That's okay. Nidhi, how about you? Do you find that it's easier to essentially create innovations that incorporate AI workflows in Canada because of the limitations with the regulations here?
I'm not much familiar with the Canadian regulations around the data, but for the US, we have more like, as I was saying, the Constitution needs to be written, right? And the privacy, we have the security team who constantly is checking all the boxes before we enable or we even experiment with anything. It is challenging. It's going to be
frozen.
I think the screen froze.
Did you lose me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't see the lag. I was kept on talking. So, but then what I was saying is testing is a little bit of challenge, but maybe just for initial releases, initial pilots. Once we have learned, we can move faster. But then US is different than Canadian. I'm not much familiar with the Canadian regulations.
Yeah, that's not a problem. We actually are a little bit more regulation light in Canada. We don't really have any AI regulation. We do have some data regulations, so we have federal PIPDA, and then a couple provinces have their own data regulations. But I always find that conversation to be interesting, especially, I believe this morning's keynote had a discussion about how regulation can stunt innovation. And I just wanted to see if that you're finding that because Canada has limited regulation, it's not really stunting that growth, or if it's had any effect. But I'm assuming it hasn't really had much effect as you continue to innovate. With that, though, thank you both for sharing your insights and expertise today. We've covered quite a bit of ground in like the 25 minutes that we've had, and I'm actually sure our audience has a couple of questions for us. So with the time that we have remaining, I'd like to open the floor to the audience. If you have a question for any of our panelists, please feel free to raise your hand, and we have a mic runner that's going to come around.
Hello. I was wondering if you guys could give us a concrete example of how you were able to leverage your real-time data to personalize customer interactions.
Who do you want to direct your question to?
Anyone who wants to answer first.
We're using some of the personalization for the mobile apps, Canada Post, that it's a real-time data. So if you're tracking certain things, those are early stages. It's not very advanced personalization, and as we mature on the personalization, the more things are happening behind the scene, that there are like business layers where you include. But you know, some of the basic personalization that it's intertwined in our, you know, current tools interacting with the customers, it's already there.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, little off topic, probably for Vera. Google announced agentic search. Do you see it as a risk or a threat? Sorry, a risk or an opportunity? How do you mitigate risk? How do you maximize opportunity?
Yeah.
Open-ended.
Sure. Yeah. So with every new announcement of the new things that generally big tech players are doing, you know, there's always risk with the first releases that they need to fix. Being a public sector, we like to be a strong followers. So we always go with like a second release to implement something while they're fixing the first one. There's a lot of tech conferences where they start with like little, you know, disclaimer that this is like GA, but you know, it takes time to, you know, we're monitoring those kind of things, but we're not implementing that immediately because we want to minimize the risk and see how other players are doing before we jump into that. So,
Are there any other questions for our panelists?
Hi, I was wondering if you could share any opportunities that you see where you could improve your customer interaction using real-time data?
yeah, it's there's a whole initiatives, you know, with the different agents, you know, and not just building one agent that will interact with the customers, but also building the agents for our employees that they're like a first line workers with customers. So you can have a multiple agents complementing each other, but it's just like important to understand that like humans and then the agents and then the systems and how the agents are designed to help the humans, you know, accelerate in, you know, what is important for them while they're interacting with the customers. I hope that answered your question.
Well, with that, we're going to be wrapping up our panel. Can we get a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you so much.